Hello, wonderful people. It's a beautiful day here in Hollywood, California. Just wanted to retouch on my last video. I didn't actually expect people to respond, like to actually be curious as to what I was talking about, things like that. Um, one question stuck out with me the most. Someone asked me how much was I drinking, and I was like, man, that is a very difficult question to ask. Depends what time of my life you were asking about. You know, I, if you must know, I was drinking. I started drinking when I was 14. Just beer and pretty much anything I could get a hang on. A hold on. And then like over as I got older and older and older, I started to get into like hard liquor and stuff like that. Party scene, hanging out with the cool kids in high school. Um, and then around the age of 21, I became a bartender, and that's kind of what started the disaster. Uh, it's a pretty stressful job. It's a fun job. Don't get me wrong. Pays a lot. Comes with its perks. Everyone loves you. You make a lot of friends. People think you're cool. And then you start drinking with not only your coworkers, you start drinking with your customers. And sorry. And then you start drinking alone. And then you find yourself stealing liquor from the company that hired you in the first place. We would do this thing. We'd call them asquerosos, which is like it's Spanish for disgusting. It'd be like a pint glass of just pure whiskey with like a splash of Coca Cola on top. That's like what, like 6, 7, 8 shots right there in one beverage. And I'd have like at first like two or three of those, and then over time it progressed to like 5, 6, 7 of them. And before I knew it, I was drinking before work, at work, and then after work. And it was nonstop. I found myself not being able to do anything without alcohol. Pumping gas, cutting my hair, and I was young, so I didn't really get the physical, like, I guess, beating from the alcohol abuse. And then I had the bright idea to move to Vegas, and that's really, oh my gosh, everything you hear about Vegas is true. I started bartending in Vegas, and then it just became at least a bottle of liquor a day, at least, just to do anything. Taxes, pay your insurance, pay your phone bill, fill up gas in your car, eat. I'd have to have like at least a couple of those drinks I just mentioned, whether it's vodka, whiskey, it didn't matter, as long as it was booze. And I just kept drinking and drinking, and it progressed to 2 bottles of whiskey a day. And I still, I'm a pretty big dude. I'm like 6'3", so I think that helped in being able to handle it. But still, like I didn't realize how much damage I was doing to my body, and I got just more involved, worked at more bars, more money, more quote unquote friends. You know, and the saying, nothing good happens after 3 in the morning. Yeah, it's true. Especially in the city that never sleeps. And then, sorry, coffee. Yeah, and then I started to drink. Then drinking wasn't enough, so I started mixing in other things I don't really like talking too much about because it was never a problem. It definitely didn't help the situation, but I guess you know, uh, drugs. I suppose they weren't really my thing. Cigarettes were never really my thing and stuff. But it came with when you're drinking, it feels nice smoking a pack of cigarettes. And then if somebody offers you something, you're like, sure, why not? I'm drunk, why not? What could go wrong? Then life happened. Uh, it started to affect me. I started to lose weight, stress all the time, cost me my job, my career. It all went bad. It all hit the fan. It all came crumbling down. I moved back home to Hollywood, and then now I have the same habit, but with none of the money. went from making thousands of dollars possibly in a day to a month to, pinching pennies. And then what happens? This gross part. You start drinking cheap liquor. Hopefully you don't know what I'm talking about. Like Taka, Crystal Palace. It's just King Cobra, like 40-ounce malt liquor, wine, sake, anything that was within like $5 to $6. And then when there was no more money, you'd start to hang out with people who also don't have money and have the same addiction. Yeah, at this point it's like a full blown, like, horrible addiction. And then we have bright ideas like, let's sell this for alcohol. Let's steal the alcohol. Let's drink all day from 8 in the morning all the way till midnight. And to the point where you just reek like it. It smells almost metallic. You throw up every morning, and then like clots of blood start coming out of your gums, and it smells like alcohol with iron. It was just bad. It was just really bad. And even then, I wasn't enough. I was like, as long as I showered and I brushed my teeth, to me that was enough. And it's just an excuse you make for yourself. I was like, hey, well, at least I'm not like those bums in the corner, right? No, you're a sneeze away from becoming that at this rate. But luckily, the people around me were patient. I wasn't violent or anything like that. I wasn't messy. I wasn't any of those things. But they could just tell I was always hammered. I was always hammered on just the worst of the worst kind of alcohol. And it was never enough. 3 bottles of wine, maybe like 4 or 5 of those pocket Crystal Palace cheap plastic vodkas, $2 shooters, the 50 percenters. Sometimes put that inside your beer just to get another effect. It was just horrible. It was disgusting. Oh my gosh, just even talking about it is just embarrassing and kind of hard to even remember and think that was me at some point. I'm happy I snapped out of it. A lot of people don't. And the same people that I'm talking about, they're still doing that. They're still living their life like that. I'm over 100 days clean. No booze, no nothing. And I never want to go back, ever. I don't. My skin's healed. My liver feels great. Body feels amazing. Got money in my pocket, I get to enjoy things normally now. And that to me is priceless. So, again, if you know of anyone in these kinds of similar situations, please, try to reach out, talk to them, be understanding, give them their time, because they're going to want to stop when they want to stop. You can't force them to stop. They're going to have their day where they're like, I'm done. Or they're not going to be done. But if an alcoholic wants to drink, trust me, he will drink. And there's not much you can do about it except be there for them. And then, thank you all for listening. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.